I used to be a people person, always making time for friends, always saying yes to gatherings. But something changed. The older I got, the more I realized. Not every connection adds joy. Some drain energy, some bring stress, and some simply don't fit anymore. Now, at 65, I've learned the beauty of selective solitude. Living alone doesn't mean being lonely, it means choosing peace. Today, I'll share why I avoid people now and how this decision made my life better. 1. Recognizing energy. Draining relationships. When I was younger, I didn't think much about the toll some relationships took on me. I thought, this is just what people do. You make time for friends, no matter how you feel. But as I got older, I began to realize that not every interaction left me feeling uplifted. Some left me tired, anxious, or even drained. It wasn't just the type of people, but the energy we exchanged. I remember a few years ago, I was invited to a regular coffee meetup with a group I had known for years. At first, I enjoyed it, but over time, I began to feel exhausted after every meeting. It wasn't the conversation, it was the constant need to keep up with everyone else's lives and pretend like I wasn't overwhelmed by my own. The more I went, the more I realized how much this was taking away from me. The key takeaway here is that not all social interactions are created equal. Some leave us energized, while others drain us. If you feel emotionally exhausted after spending time with someone, it might be a sign that the relationship needs reevaluating. One small change I made was to start saying no to events that didn't feel right. I didn't have to explain myself. I simply acknowledged that my time and energy are precious. If an invitation didn't bring me joy, I kindly declined. It wasn't easy at first, especially when I felt guilty, but over time, it felt freeing. You'll feel so much lighter when you focus on relationships that actually feed your spirit. Take a moment to think about your own social circle. Do you have friends or acquaintances who leave you drained? It might be worth considering limiting those interactions. The right people will appreciate your boundaries, and you'll feel more at peace. 2. Prioritizing meaningful connections. A few months ago, I sat down to reflect on my closest relationships. I had a small group of friends I had known for decades, and I realized something important. I'd been spending so much time with acquaintances out of obligation that I had forgotten how to nurture the friendships that truly mattered. This became clear when one of my longtime friends reached out, and I realized we hadn't spent quality time together in months, despite living nearby. We shared a deep conversation that left me feeling not just heard, but understood. That was the moment I realized I needed to make more room for people who truly mattered. We all have relationships that stand out more than others. These are the people who truly support us, who understand our struggles, and who add value to our lives. The beauty of aging is that you have more clarity on what you truly need from others. So how do you prioritize those relationships? For me, I started by scheduling time with friends who made me feel good. I didn't wait for things to line up perfectly or for the right moment. I made time. Whether it's a phone call, a short walk, or a cozy afternoon. The key is to focus on quality rather than quantity. I also let go of the pressure to keep up with everyone. Not every friendship requires the same level of attention. There's no shame in accepting that some relationships are meant to be occasional, while others deserve regular nurturing. Focus on the ones that fill your heart, not your calendar. 3. Finding strength in enjoying one's own company. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was to enjoy my own company. There's a certain fear in being alone, especially when we're used to constant companionship. But as I began to embrace solitude, I realized that it's possible to find peace in being by myself. There was a time when I felt a pang of loneliness on days when I didn't have a social outing or phone call to look forward to. It made me question whether I was doing something wrong. I thought I had to be constantly connected to people to feel valued. But then, I started taking little moments for myself. I would sit with a cup of tea, read a book, or simply watch the sunset. Slowly, I discovered that being alone didn't mean being lonely. I found joy in hobbies, in quiet afternoons, in little acts of self-care that were just for me. It wasn't instant. It took time to get used to, but eventually, I looked forward to the peace that came with solitude. If you're finding it hard to enjoy being alone, I encourage you to start small. Try spending a quiet afternoon doing something you love. No distractions, no pressure. The idea is to rediscover what makes you happy on your own. You'll be surprised how much more confident and content you'll feel once you start nurturing your relationship with yourself. Embrace the freedom to enjoy simple pleasures without the need for constant validation from others. It's not about avoiding people, but rather learning how to exist peacefully without relying on them for your happiness. By learning to enjoy our own company, we gain a deeper sense of self-worth. You are enough just as you are, and there's power in learning to love your own presence. 4. Letting go of social expectations. When I first started pulling back from social engagements, I felt a sense of guilt creeping in. Am I being selfish? I asked myself. Shouldn't I be doing more, reaching out to people more? Society often tells us that we should always be present, always be available, especially as we age. But what I realized over time is that it's okay to prioritize our own needs without feeling guilty. A few months ago, I was invited to a birthday party for an old acquaintance. It wasn't someone I was particularly close to, but I felt the pressure to attend. Everyone would expect me to be there, right? I almost said yes, just to avoid the uncomfortable feeling of saying no. But then I remembered what I had learned. Not every invitation requires a yes, and not every event is worth your time. I kindly declined. I didn't have to explain myself or apologize for not attending. I simply acknowledged that I had other priorities that day, mainly my own peace and well-being. The relief I felt in that moment was overwhelming. I realized that sometimes saying no is an act of self-respect. If you're struggling with social expectations, start by recognizing that your time is valuable. It's not selfish to care for yourself first. In fact, it's essential. You don't owe anyone an explanation for needing time to recharge, to focus on your hobbies, or to simply enjoy peace. Learn to say no without guilt. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, and you'll feel more in control of your life. 5. Handling pushback from others. Of course, not everyone understands your need for solitude, especially if they're used to seeing you as the social butterfly. When I started stepping back from social gatherings, a few friends expressed confusion. "Why aren't you coming out anymore? We miss you," they'd say. I felt a pang of guilt each time, like I was disappointing them. But I had to remind myself that this was my journey, and I was doing what was best for me. One particular instance stands out. A dear friend of mine, who I've known for years, called me after I had politely turned down another social invitation. She sounded disappointed, and I could feel her questioning why I wasn't making more of an effort. At that moment, I had to be honest with myself. I wasn't avoiding her or neglecting our friendship. I was simply taking care of my emotional health. I explained that I needed more alone time to focus on myself. I reassured her that it wasn't personal. It was just that I felt more fulfilled by quieter, more intimate moments than by large social gatherings. She was understanding, but it took a bit of time for her to adjust to my new approach. If you find that others are pushing back against your desire for more solitude, it's important to communicate your boundaries gently but firmly. Be honest about your need for space and offer reassurance that it's not a reflection of how you feel about the relationship. You don't have to defend your decision to seek solitude, but you do have to stand by it. It's a process of finding balance and learning to trust that true friends will respect your boundaries. 6. Differentiating between isolation and empowered solitude. It can be easy to fall into the trap of thinking that solitude equals isolation. When you're used to being around people, it may seem like pulling back is a sign that you're growing lonely or disconnected. I had that fear at first, too. Would I eventually feel cut off? Would I miss out on important moments? But over time, I came to understand that there's a world of difference between being isolated and choosing empowered solitude. Isolation happens when you feel disconnected from others, when you're hiding from the world out of fear or sadness. Empowered solitude, on the other hand, is when you take control of your space and time, choosing moments of quiet to recharge, reflect, or engage in personal growth. I began to differentiate the two by examining how I felt after spending time alone. Was I feeling depressed, anxious, or sad? Or was I feeling refreshed, centered, and clear-headed? The answer was always the latter, once I embraced the idea of solitude as an opportunity for growth. There were times when I needed reassurance that I wasn't isolating myself, so I made small efforts to check in with the outside world. I'd send a text to a close friend or family member to check in. I would still enjoy occasional social outings, but I did so on my own terms, not out of obligation. The difference between isolation and empowered solitude is about intention. When you're choosing to be alone for the sake of self-care, reflection, or creativity, it's empowering. When you're avoiding others out of fear or sadness, it can become isolating. It's crucial to remind yourself that solitude, when chosen, is a tool for self-care. It's not a sign of loneliness or rejection. It's a step toward deeper independence and fulfillment. When you learn to enjoy your own company, you'll begin to see solitude not as an absence of connection, but as a vital part of your personal growth. 7. Overcoming the fear of missing out. FOMO. As I spent more time on my own, there was a nagging feeling that would occasionally creep in. The fear of missing out. Everyone else seemed to be attending family gatherings, celebrations, or meetups, and I wondered if I was isolating myself too much. It felt like the world was moving forward while I was sitting on the sidelines. But with time, I realized that FOMO is often a product of comparison. I remember a time when I saw pictures on social media from a family reunion I hadn't attended. It looked like everyone was having a great time, and I started questioning my decision to stay home. Was I wrong for choosing solitude? Was I missing out on important moments? But then, I took a step back and reminded myself of the reasons I decided to embrace solitude. That family reunion might have been fun for some, but it wasn't the environment I needed at that moment. It wasn't about avoiding social events forever. It was about choosing what brought me joy and peace. FOMO doesn't have to control you. The key is to focus on what truly makes you feel fulfilled. Instead of comparing yourself to others, reflect on what you've gained by choosing solitude. Perhaps it's more time for hobbies, self-reflection, or creative pursuits. These are the moments that nourish your soul. When FOMO strikes, remind yourself that you are not missing out on life. You are living life on your own terms. The more you honor your needs, the more you'll realize that you haven't missed a thing. It's not about keeping up with the crowd. It's about living authentically. 8. Creating a safe and comfortable home. Environment. One of the biggest challenges I faced when I started living alone was creating a safe and comfortable space that truly felt like my own. I had spent years in larger homes with family, and suddenly, my living situation was different. The thought of making my home secure and comfortable felt daunting, but it quickly became one of the most rewarding aspects of my independence. I began by making small changes, things that didn't overwhelm me, but that brought a sense of security. I replaced outdated light bulbs with brighter, energy-efficient ones. I installed grab bars in the bathroom, ensuring I could move around safely without worrying about slips or falls. Slowly but surely, my space transformed into a place that wasn't just a house, but a sanctuary. The most important part of creating a safe home is addressing your own needs. For example, I made sure that my living room was a welcoming space for relaxation, with cozy lighting and comfortable seating. I also focused on ensuring that my kitchen was practical for my needs, with easy-to-reach storage and items that I could use without difficulty. If you haven't yet created your safe space, start with small changes. Check the areas of your home where you spend the most time, and think about how you can make them more comfortable and secure. Simple adjustments, like adding extra lighting, securing rugs, or creating clear pathways can make a huge difference. Most importantly, remember that your home should be a reflection of you, a place where you feel safe, relaxed, and supported. By creating an environment that nurtures your well-being, you set yourself up for success as you continue to embrace independence. 9. Finding support and allies when needed. While solitude can be empowering, it's also important to recognize when you need support. We all have moments when we need someone to lean on, whether it's for advice, emotional support, or even just companionship. This doesn't mean you're failing at independence. It simply means that you understand the value of having trusted allies in your life. One thing I learned was that asking for help doesn't diminish my independence. A few months ago, I had a minor health scare. It wasn't anything too serious, but it reminded me of how important it is to have a few reliable people around for support. I reached out to my sister, who has always been there for me, and we had a long conversation about my health and my plans moving forward. Her support gave me the reassurance I needed to make informed decisions about my well-being. Having a small network of close friends, family members, or neighbors who you can count on can make a world of difference. Whether you need someone to help with a practical task or simply someone to listen, it's important to cultivate relationships with those who understand your boundaries and respect your need for independence. Start by identifying the people in your life who you trust and feel comfortable with. These are your allies, those who support your journey and help you stay grounded. It's okay to lean on them when you need it. Just as you value your solitude, you also deserve to have the right people by your side when the need arises. Don't be afraid to reach out when necessary. True strength lies in knowing when to ask for help and having the courage to do so. 10. Facing the fear of loneliness. One of the hardest emotional challenges I faced as I spent more time alone was the fear of loneliness. At first, it wasn't something I openly admitted to myself, but as the days went by, I started to feel that emptiness. I couldn't help but wonder, was I making a mistake? Was this loneliness something I could handle? I remember a quiet evening, after I had decided to embrace solitude for a while, when the silence in my house felt overwhelming. The phone didn't ring, there were no visitors, and the world outside felt distant. I sat there with my thoughts and felt the weight of it all. That was when the fear of loneliness truly hit me. It felt like a creeping shadow, and I wasn't sure how to confront it. But then, I had an epiphany. I realized that loneliness didn't have to define me. It wasn't a sign of failure or weakness. It was just an emotion that, like any other, would come and go. I needed to reframe how I saw it. Instead of seeing loneliness as a negative, I could choose to view it as a space for reflection, for personal growth, and for creativity. If loneliness feels like a challenge for you, try to acknowledge it without judgment. It's okay to feel lonely sometimes, but remember that it doesn't mean you are alone in the world. Reach out to others when you need support, but also find ways to embrace solitude as an opportunity to reconnect with yourself. Engage in hobbies, learn something new, or take up activities that bring you joy. This way, you transform loneliness into something empowering. 11. Letting go of the past. Another emotional hurdle I encountered as I embraced living alone was letting go of the past. I had memories of family gatherings, of being surrounded by people, and I often found myself longing for those days. The idea of letting go of that part of my life felt bittersweet, almost like I was giving up a piece of myself. I realized that letting go didn't mean erasing the past. It meant accepting that my current journey was different. I had to make space for the new chapter in my life, without feeling like I was abandoning what had come before. One day, I looked through old photo albums and felt a wave of nostalgia, but instead of dwelling on what was no longer, I decided to cherish those memories for what they were. As I navigated this emotional shift, I began to reframe the process of letting go. I wasn't losing anything. I was simply making room for new experiences. It's normal to feel sadness when things change, but remember that change doesn't mean the past wasn't valuable. It just means you're ready for something new. If you're struggling with letting go of the past, remind yourself that it's okay to grieve what has been. However, there's also beauty in accepting what's ahead. Creating new memories, embracing new routines, and welcoming new opportunities are all part of the natural process of growth. It's about finding peace with change, understanding that your past will always be a part of you, but it doesn't define who you are today. 12. Reconnecting with your inner strength. As I continued to live alone and face these challenges, I learned something profound. I had more strength within me than I had ever realized. It wasn't always easy to see, especially during the tough moments, but as I navigated through fear, loneliness, and uncertainty, I began to rediscover my inner resilience. I think back to a moment last winter when the weather turned unexpectedly harsh, and I found myself stranded at home. The power went out, the heating was off, and I was left with nothing but the cold and the silence. For a moment, I felt that familiar wave of panic rising. What if this was too much? What if I couldn't handle it? But instead of letting fear take over, I took action. I grabbed extra blankets, lit a few candles for warmth, and even started a little project to keep my mind engaged. I wasn't alone in the sense that I had the resources within me to handle this challenge. That's when I realized I was stronger than I had given myself credit for. If you're unsure about your own strength, I encourage you to reflect on moments in your life when you face difficulty and come out stronger. Those moments, big or small, are reminders of your resilience. You have faced challenges before and emerged stronger. Trust that you have the ability to handle whatever comes your way now. Reconnecting with your inner strength is about recognizing that even in the face of difficulty, you have the power to adapt and persevere. You've already come so far, and you'll continue to grow stronger each day. Through my journey of living alone, I've discovered strength, independence, and a deeper connection with myself. It wasn't always easy, but every challenge taught me something valuable. Now, it's your turn to embrace your journey. Start small, trust yourself, and know that you're never alone on this path. If my story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's support one another in this journey. Subscribe for more tips on embracing independence and living your best life.